So, I finished reading the first book in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. That book is The Blade itself. Read it. Actually, it was kind of a mix. I read as well as listened to the audiobook, which actually, let me see. Who did the audiobook? Steven something? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Because I do want to bring this up. Um, and it is Stephen Pacey. That's right. Okay. So I had heard from a few people that, by the way, I finished just this morning, so this is my very raw, unfiltered thoughts. I had heard from a lot of people that they prefer going audiobook, and if you don't know my opinion, I think audiobooks are a very great resource, but it's not my preferred method of experiencing a story. I just feel like I retain a lot less information, and it's just more fun as well as quicker to read. However, I heard a lot about this audiobook, so I kind of would go between them. And I gotta say, man, the audiobook is truly incredible. Stephen Pacey is really giving Michael Kramer a run for his money as my favorite narrator now. And the reason why, before I even get to the book, I just want to get the audiobook out of the way. The reason why is because just the amount of theatrics he puts into his performances, the voices, each one sounds so different, but especially I thought it was really special the way he handled Sanda Glokta, who spoiler is my favorite character so far. I think that's like a very universal opinion. But Glokta, not going into spoilers, this is a spoiler free review, but he's a very broken, crippled man, essentially almost like a stroke victim. He is just horrifically tortured. He's lost control of a lot of his body. He has his teeth removed and filed in a way where it's like kind of awkwardly broken up, so he can't really eat solid food. He has to just eat like oatmeal, and he hates it. And what he does though is because Glokta used to be like a Chad. He used to, like they bring up in the story, he used to swing with the ladies. He used to be a master dueler, and so what Stephen Pacey does is he gives Glokta this slurred lisp kind of sound, but then in the internal monologue he has just a proper dignified voice, and I thought that actually added so much to the character because I mean, yeah, if I mean, I can't relate, but I'm sure if I had some kind of physical altercation and I was not able to enunciate the way I used to, my internal voice would still be the way I talked for most of my life. So I thought that was awesome. And so yeah, if you are an audiobook guy, if you prefer audiobooks, you're going to love this. If you are on the fence like me, give it a shot. I think just for a little bit, just to get those voices, because those voices are just so great. Anyways, as for the book itself, this is my first Joe Abercrombie book. I've kind of pre-ordered being a Joe Abercrombie fan. I mean, I dropped a pretty penny for the Broken Binding edition of The Devils because it just sounds awesome, and I've heard a lot of praise over on BookTube, over on Goodreads, etc. And I didn't love the blade itself, unfortunately, but I do appreciate it, and it was definitely a breath of fresh air. So, as far as I understand, the First Law trilogy was actually planned out as a trilogy, and Abercrombie stuck to that. Now, there is another trilogy, The Age of Madness, but that's like a sequel. And I really know nothing about this story at all. I just knew of the name Logan Ninefingers, and I heard a lot of things about Glokta. And literally, that was it. So this is a cool experience for me because unlike something like Stormlight, where it was just kind of all around me, it feels like First Law is kind of kept secret. Like people talk about it, but they don't really discuss it. But what I didn't really expect, and I guess this ties into the idea that I have. I'm not sure if it's true that Joe Abercrombie planned it as a trilogy. Is that this book doesn't feel like a full book. It feels like just the setup for this singular story. So I'm wondering if this trilogy is really just one book, essentially. That's not a bad thing. It was just different, and um, different in kind of a good way, but it ultimately I don't feel very fulfilled reading this. Looking at the page counts, they're actually very consistent, which I think is really cool. It's very common in fantasy to just have these gargantuan page counts and word counts, but First Law, from what I can see, is actually pretty consistent. 529 pages for Blade itself, 539 for Before They Were Hanged, and 603 for Last Argument of Kings, which that's the last one. You expect it to be the longest. And I think that's really cool. This book is such a quick read. I read it. I could have read it faster, but I was kind of busy with work and other things, Monster Hunter, a lot of that. But anyways, I still got through it real quick. It's super light. It's very dialogue heavy. There's not really that much action, but the dialogue is really good. And something I wasn't expecting, as people always say the First Law is like peak grimdark along with Song of Ice and Fire. I wasn't really prepared for how funny it was. It is this very sardonic, dark comedy to it, and I really appreciated that. It made this world feel kind of fun and not just like miserable, because these characters are all just horrible, horrible people. There's like really no one good. The only couple people that are like could be good are like jokes and are very annoying, and so they're kind of just fodder for this sardonic, mean humor. It kind of reminds me of almost like Sam Raimi type dark comedy, and I love that. It really meshes well with the brutal hyper violence that happens throughout, and just how realistic and gritty it feels. I know that they are going to adapt one of the spin-off books, Best Served Cold, which I think is actually a really cool way to introduce a big fantasy world, is do a standalone spin-off. And if that does well, then you invest in the trilogy. I think that's really cool. Tim Miller is attached to direct it, and I think, this seems kind of up his alley. He did the first two Deadpools, which were, more grounded than, Deadpool and Wolverine. And I think he could pull it off. So, and Rebecca Ferguson, I mean, of course I'm going to watch it just for her, but also I'm sure this book is great. I'm going to read it. I'm reading them in release order. I tend to do that for everything. So that's not going to be until I finish the trilogy. But anyways, going to the story itself. So we have really, I want to say like four crucial characters. We have, what's his name? Bias. We have Glokta, Logan Nine Fingers, and we have Pharaoh. And really, they're kind of doing their own thing, and then they kind of just unite after a certain point. And I'm gonna say I felt like it wasn't really as natural as I was hoping it would feel, but I think there's kind of a point to that. Like, Baez is very mysterious, and he's kind of just setting this team up for this quest that's not even in this book. It ends on this kind of big cliffhanger, and usually with a first book, you have kind of a solid story, right? Beginning, middle, and end, and this does not have that. And again, that's not a negative, it's just it was kind of strange. But it's interesting. I hear people say Before They're Hanged is like an all-timer sequel book, and I am invested. Logan Nine Fingers is a lot of fun. I think probably the highlight of the book actually is when he first goes to this big city and he's just kind of a fish out of water. And there's a really great passage where Abercrombie contrasts Logan Nine Fingers' experience in these huge armies with being in this huge crowd, and how he felt like the city crowd was actually more threatening, because he knew that in a battle he could just fight his way out of it, but he can't do that in a city. There's also a really great part where he and Baez have to go to like a drama store to buy costumes, so they can pass themselves off as like a higher class, and I thought that was really fun. There's not too much world building, but it is there. There's these flatheads and other kind of monsters from this Gurkish empire that's kind of set up as the big bad. We have everything with Pharaoh going on. She's just this manically angry, broken woman on this quest for revenge. And she has kind of a mystical capability that she doesn't really seem super self aware of. And Logan Nine Fingers, without going to spoilers, is sort of the same way. She comes across Yulwei, who's this kind of like almost like a Gandalf figure, but kind of more badass. And that was really fun. As for Jazal, did I mention Jazal earlier? I'm not sure if I did. As for Jazal, I really did not enjoy his parts of the book. I felt like they just brought it down with this lame melodrama about just fencing, and he's falling in love with a lower class woman, and that woman has this abuse. She had this abusive father, and now her brother is being abusive, and it was just kind of felt trite, a little contrived, and just really basic compared to everything else. But one thing it does do well is it does set up Jazal as this kind of not fish out of water. What do I say? He's like the anchor. He's kind of like he's the spoiled noble who is kind of experiencing this world now and these grimy, gross characters. And I'm sure he's going to have a good role as this series goes on now that he's kind of stuck with this team, whether he likes it or not. But it was just kind of awkward and a little boring because we're set up that he's going to have this big duel, but then he has like all these other duels leading up to that. I did like the actual tournament. I thought that was very well done. So I guess it kind of doesn't matter if the setup and the journey was a little dry, but then the actual event was pretty well done. I guess that's fine. I mean, it's probably better than the opposite, right? Where it's like a wet fart kind of finale. And that didn't happen. Like I said, there's not a lot of action, but when it's there, it's really good, especially with the dog man. There's this huge chapter towards the end. I won't say much because of spoilers, but it was really great, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that kind of action. Another highlight of the book is there's this kind of mystery about going to this tower that's been locked for ages because they've been waiting for the first magi. And when they actually get there, that really paid off, and that was really cool. Something that I deeply appreciate about Abercrombie's writing and what is keeping me actually really excited to continue this series, despite my criticisms with this book. I do have quite a few criticisms, as you can tell, but there is a really interesting use of magic in this, and the way it's written is just very personally appealing to me. I had this discussion recently when I was talking about Malazan and especially like Conan the Barbarian and contrasting it with Sanderson kind of type fantasy, where I really appreciate when magic, I like to spell it as like with like Magick, kind of like a weirder, more primal magic that you don't really understand and that very few people can access, and it's very like mystical and dangerous. Like it's like you don't want to tap into magic because it could destroy you. And I'm really happy to say that so far First Law, it feels like it's operating on that kind of magic system where it's not like this super, oh, here's all the rules and all that, and this counters this. It doesn't really feel like that at all, and I really like that, and I want to know more about this world. Like I said, we don't really get a lot of plot, but we get character development in spades. So with these really great characters, especially Glokta, Logan Nine Fingers, Pharaoh, I'm really excited to see where they go. So I would recommend so far the Blade itself. I'm sure I'm going to love the books that are coming even more. And you know what? Maybe when I kind of view it all as one complete story, I'll be able to then go back and say, oh, Blade itself was really great, and it did a good job setting up this world, story, and characters. It's just as its own book, it might not be super fulfilling to you. But having read a majority of Stormlight and all these other huge, complicated books, it's really refreshing to have something this, I don't want to say simple, but more stripped down. So if you are like getting into fantasy, this might be a good way to go because it's very light fantasy, at least so far. Or if you're a veteran it might be also good because it's a breath of fresh air compared to other things, you know. So, anyways, that's the Blade itself. I'm hoping to read all of at least the first trilogy by the time the Devils comes out. Which, I mean, everything I've heard and seen, it just looks awesome. So I'll keep you all updated.